back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I'm here today to review two books. One is a fiction and one is a non-fiction, but they kind of have similar-ish themes, and what I mean by that is just really shocking, important themes. So, the first one I want to talk about is called I Am, and this is by Maggie O'Farrell. It's the first book I've read by her, although I do believe she writes quite a lot of fiction. This is a non-fiction memoir. And the other one that I want to talk about is this one, a fiction book by Louise O'Neill, and this one is called Asking for It. So I'm going to start off with I Am. And this book is one that's quite short. I actually audiobooked this, and I picked this one up because it is one of the Wellcome Book Prize books that was nominated for this year's prize, and so I'm reading it to discuss it with Eleanor. I wasn't sure what I would think of this one because I'd never really heard much about this author. It wasn't necessarily something that I'd seen floating around too much, although I had seen it in places. So I audiobooked this, and I thought it was a really, really great audiobook. It's actually narrated by a different person from the author, but it's done really, really well. It's actually the story of Maggie O'Farrell's life, and I believe it follows, I think, 17 or 16 different brushes that she had with death. She has had a lot of different situations in her life which could have gone very badly, and in fact they didn't. She's obviously still alive. For some reason or other, she has definitely experienced brushes with death more frequently than some, including a childhood illness, something that has recurred throughout her life, various events where men tried to take advantage, various moments where her children have suffered and she's been at a loss of what to do, and stuff like that. Her life has been crazy and sweet and funny and terrible all at once, and this is kind of the expression of all of those things. She kind of gets down in words just how very bizarre life can be and the challenges that it can throw at you. I think for me, the thing that really worked about this was the shock factor. It's visceral, it's emotional, she tells it how it is, and she does it in a very raw, poignant way. She's not afraid to show her emotions about topics that not everyone necessarily talks about. For example, she talked a lot about miscarriage and how miscarriage can affect someone drastically, and also just a lot about who she was when she was in those dark places. I thought that was really, really well done. She does an incredible job of talking about her childhood illness and also talking about how she felt when she was surrounded by doubters and people who didn't really think she could do it, but how she overcame fears and how people sort of giving her confidence and giving her advice and tips was a real input to kind of regaining herself. Overall, this is a very short, sweet, poignant book, and it worked really, really well as an audiobook for me, so I certainly enjoyed it, and I am intrigued about whether I should read some of her fiction work. I'm not sure it's my usual kind of stuff, but I'd love to hear if any of you have read it, what you think of her fiction work, and whether any of you have read this one, which I definitely recommend if you haven't, and if you're interested in memoirs. It's certainly different and certainly has beautiful writing, so I gave that one a 4 stars and I definitely recommend it. The other book I want to talk to you about is this one, Asking for It. Now this is a fiction book, but it deals with a very real topic, and that is the topic of rape. So if you're not comfortable with that, avoid this book. It's definitely not a book that everyone will like, and Louise O'Neill is an author who likes to tackle really heavy, dark subjects, and she does so in this book really, really well. So this is a YA read. It follows a girl called Emma, who is basically like the pop queen, princess, Barbie of her world. She is the one that everyone looks up to, she's the one who's popular, she's in charge, she has a little posse of girls who go around with her. She's basically one of the mean girls, I suppose, and she's someone that not everyone likes, but everyone wants to be friends with, or wants to have the respect of, or wants to go out with and have sex with. So she is the popular one of the school. Everyone knows her, she's popular beyond belief. However, she's also mean. She's not the nicest person you're ever going to meet. She's not only mean about other people, but she's also quite mean to some of her friends, and she doesn't really stick up for them in certain situations where she probably should. There are times where she betrays them, there are times where she does things that are quite questionable, and she doesn't really always come across in the best way. So although she is the popular one based largely off of her looks, it's not based off of her personality. And we follow her as she goes through life, and we find out a bit about her and who she is and how she can be quite mean and bitchy. Unfortunately, her story then takes a tragic turn when one night she decides to get quite drunk and she ends up taking some drugs and she gets quite out of her mind, to the point where she actually ends up getting raped by a group of boys in her year and she doesn't remember any of it. The next morning, these photos of her rape appear online and there are hundreds of them, and she cannot remember a thing. She has no idea what happened. She is absolutely horrified by the photos and the fact that not only has her brother seen them, but her friends and everyone at school has seen them, teachers, everyone. And she's horrified, she's devastated, her life is basically over in her eyes. And eventually these photos circulate onto the national news as well. From that point onwards, it's more of a recovery story. How on earth do you come back from something so devastating, so public and so humiliating? Of course, it's not all her fault. She shouldn't have taken drugs, but she definitely didn't deserve to be raped in this way. And it is a horrific rape. It is not a pleasant scene to read about, and it's certainly something that will make you physically uncomfortable and a little bit sick, I would say, because it's not something that should ever be okay. But the thing that I think Louise O'Neill, the author, is questioning here is, when is it ever okay to be raped? It's never okay, in my opinion, and that's why the title is asking for it. Because she was a bit bitchy and mean, did she deserve it? I don't think so, but that's kind of the moral of the story. Even if someone isn't the nicest person, even if they do things that are wrong and they do things that are silly and stupid and they take drugs and do things to their body that they shouldn't, even if they do all that, they still don't deserve to be raped, because it is a horrendous thing to go through and it's something that you cannot necessarily pick yourself up from and just recover. It's something that's a trauma, something that's going to take a lot to get over, and that's what this author is dealing with. She really goes into detail about how on earth can someone get over this? How can you feel after something like this has happened? And she does a great job of drawing you into the story, but also making you think about reality and how this is actually reality for some people and what they've had to go through, and how so many of them may have ended up committing suicide or ended up being completely scarred for the rest of their lives. It's a very heartfelt book, it's very devastating, it's very shocking, and it's certainly not a light to read, but for me it worked really well, and I read it in one sitting because it was just so emotionally heavy and something that I felt like I was completely into the story for whilst I was reading it. I really like this author. I've read 2 of her books now, and she's got an adult book coming out very soon that I'm really keen to pick up and read, because I think that one also deals with quite a heavy topic. So I really recommend her, but only if you don't mind the really shocking stuff that it deals with. So I gave this one, again, a 4 out of 5 stars. So those are the 2 books I had to review for you today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in my next video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.